So U.S. President Donald Trump is taking aim at 4 minority congresswomen with racist language. This on the same day that his administration says it has begun raids targeting thousands of undocumented immigrants. The president attacked the congresswomen in a series of tweets, writing, quote, "So interesting to see progressive Democrat congresswomen who originally came from countries whose governments are a complete and total catastrophe." He added that they should leave to go back to where they came from.
But 3 of the 4 women he targeted were actually born in the United States. And the 4th, Ilhan Omar, came to the States as a child and became a U.S. citizen in 2000. Alexandria Ocasio Cortez responded, "Mr. President, the country I come from and the country we all swear to is the United States. But given how you've destroyed our border with inhumane camps, all at a benefit to you and the core who profit off them, you are absolutely right about the corruption laid at your feet."
And Ilhan Omar tweeted this: "You're stoking white nationalism because you are angry that people like us are serving in Congress and fighting against your hate-filled agenda." She quotes Robert F. Kennedy saying, "America's answer to the intolerant man is diversity, the very diversity which our heritage of religious freedom has inspired." Let's talk about all of this with Larry Sabato, director of the University of Virginia's Center for Politics. Larry, is there any other way to describe these tweets other than racist?
Not in my mind, and I think that's been the consensus, except, of course, with the true believers, the Trump true believers. But how can you interpret it any other way? And he knows exactly what he's doing. People say, well, he doesn't really believe that. I don't care whether he believes it or not. He said it, and he's president of the United States, and it's racist. It's aimed at 4 women of color, the implication being that they weren't even American citizens. And in fact, 3 of them were born in America, and the 4th became an American citizen when she was quite young. So it's outrageous, and Cyril, he knows it works. That's why he does it.
Yeah, you point out 3 of the 4 women that this was more than likely aimed at were born in the U.S. They couldn't be more American based on where they were born. I mean, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, born in the Bronx. Ms. Presley, born in Cincinnati. Ms. Tlaib, born in Detroit. You can't be more American than that.
That's absolutely true. But you see, it makes no difference to Trump. And I hate to say this, but it's worked with his followers, at least if Twitter is any indication. They don't care where they were born. They agree with the sentiment. And the sentiment clearly is designed to energize them early on, just as he's energized them since day one for the election in 2020.
I want to read to you part of Charles M. Blow's column in the New York Times following these tweets. He says, "The central framing of this kind of thinking is that this is a white country founded and built by white men and destined to be maintained as a white country." He goes on, "For anyone to be accepted as truly American, they must assimilate and acquiesce to that narrative." Do you agree with that?
I do. And again, I would just suggest that the polls all the way along, including the most recent ones released in the last couple of days, show that it's working for Trump. Just as in 2016, he once again has large majorities among whites, and particularly among white men, but also white women, but white men a much larger lead. It works. That's why he does it.
So this is where we are now, Larry. I remember very well in the first year of his presidency, and there were several instances and several things that were either said or tweeted or done by the president that caused everybody, including ourselves, to ask whether it was racist and whether the president was racist. And I remember the day you and I spoke after he used a derogatory term that I'm not going to repeat to characterize African countries. And I asked you, Larry, is the president racist? I remember your words. You said to me, "I used to think he was racially insensitive, but now I think the president is racist." That was a year ago. And here we are again today.
Yes, I agree with myself, Cyril. I think I was right before it. I'm right now, and you're right now. And no one can really interpret this any differently. Even if you add the political dimension to it, it still amounts to the same thing. It's encouraging racism, and it's revealing something about himself that I think we've always suspected, even during the campaign. But as numb as we are to all this, it is so manifestly obvious that I don't know how anyone can deny it.
I want to run through some of the reactions, pull up some tweets. Let's start with Nancy Pelosi, but we have others. The House Speaker had this to say or write. She says, when real Donald Trump tells 4 American congresswomen to go back to their countries, he reaffirms his plan to make America great again has always been about making America white again. So she's making the same point that Charles Blow was making. Then we have Joaquin Castro. He kept it short. He kept it simple. He said, they're Americans. You're a bigot. All right, let's keep them coming. We have Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She's one of the people who was targeted. She says this, bold letters, this is what racism looks like. We are what democracy looks like, and we're not going anywhere. We have one more. This one from Congresswoman Bass of California. Racists tweet racist things. What we should be focused on right now, though, especially today, is that racists also create and enforce racist policies. They're trying to deport people across Los Angeles. As I type this, stay focused, know your rights. Do you think this has the timing of this has anything to do, perhaps, with the raids that were going on today, or this is just, the news just prompted the president to tweet this?
I think it's a combination. Look, he does this every week. It's not like he leaves the immigration issue alone or doesn't connect it to broader views of race that he and his followers have. So this is just of a piece. And as I say, we've all become numb to it, which is really dangerous. No one should ever be numb to this. But we've been at it now for years. He does the same thing over and over, and he believes it works, and it has to this point.
All right, Larry Sabato, I'm pretty sure we'll be talking about this again down the road. Thank you so much, Larry.
Thank you, Cyril.
We have more now on those raids that the Trump administration says are targeting undocumented immigrants across the country. Immigration officials say they are going after about 2,000 immigrants ordered by the courts to be removed from the country in nearly 12 major U.S. cities.
But so far, CNN hasn't been able to confirm any arrests, and the New York Times reports that plans for the raids had to change. Instead of one large simultaneous sweep, they're doing smaller raids over the course of a week, since news reports tipped off immigrant communities about what to expect.
Yes, regardless, the acting commissioner for U.S. Customs and Border Protection says the focus of the immigration sweep is on violent criminals and aggravated felons, which should matter to all Americans.
The individuals that ICE goes after, and they do this every single day, are not individuals that are here undocumented. They're individuals that are here illegally. And in this case, their priority has always been, and it will be, to go after those that are criminal aliens, meaning those people that are here illegally and have committed additional crimes against American citizens.
CNN's Paul Verkaman is in Los Angeles watching for any immigration raids there, but he says there wasn't much out of the ordinary this weekend.
With ICE raids underway across the country, President Trump told progressive Democratic women of color in Congress to go back to the crime-infested places from which they came. He's targeting specifically these women. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, born in New York. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, born in Somalia, later growing up in Minnesota. And Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, born in Chicago, Illinois. Well, in a series of racist tweets this morning, Trump writing this, so interesting to see progressive Democrat congresswomen who originally came from countries whose governments are a complete and total catastrophe, the worst, most corrupt and inept anywhere in the world, if they even have a functioning government at all, now loudly and viciously telling the people of the United States, the greatest and most powerful nation on earth, how our government is to be run. Why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came? Then come back and show us how it is done. These places need your help badly. You can't leave fast enough. I'm sure that Nancy Pelosi would be very happy to quickly work out free travel arrangements. So, all 4 of those women the president targeted have since responded. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio Cortez responding with, Mr. President, the country I come from and the country we all swear to is the United States. But given how you've destroyed our border with inhumane camps, all at a benefit to you and the core who profit off them. You are absolutely right about the corruption laid at your feet. And Congresswoman Ilhan Omar writing this: you are stoking white nationalism because you are angry that people like us are serving in Congress and fighting against your hate-filled agenda. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib writing this: yo, real Donald Trump. I am fighting corruption in our country. I do it every day. When I told your administration accountable as a U.S. Congresswoman, Detroit taught me how to fight for the communities you continue to degrade and attack. Keep talking. You'll be out of the White House soon. And Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley writing this: this is what racism looks like. We are what democracy looks like, and we're not going anywhere except back to D.C. to fight for the families you marginalize and vilify every day. All right, so let's talk about all of this. CNN political commentators Karen Finney and Maria Cardona joining me right now. Good to see you, ladies.
Hey, Fred.
Hey. Wow, boy, this is a lot. Gosh, yeah. Maria, does this only, stir up some of the president's supporters, or is it detracting those, even though we have not heard from many?
I think it absolutely stirs up the president's supporters. Look, this is why he does it. But interestingly enough, Fred, I also think he does it because he doesn't know what to do with these 4 young progressive women of color who have their own voice, who have a ton of support within the country, who are fighting. They are right about what they tweeted, are fighting each and every single day, along with all the other Democrats, his hate-filled agenda, his corrupt administration. We have not seen corruption like this, I don't think, ever. And they are there, along with the rest of the Democratic caucus, fighting this every single day. But the fact that they are 4 young women of color, I think, just drives him nuts. I think it scares him. And I think that, again, it underscores that he doesn't really understand what this country is and who it is made up of. I myself am an immigrant from Colombia, and I get attacked every day by his supporters who he has given permission to put, wear their racism, their sexism, and their misogyny on their sleeve.
Yeah, but Karen, you're not just a black woman if you're offended by this.
Sure.
And, the president needs a lot of support that, is of a varied tapestry in order to win re-election. So why does he take this route? Doesn't he realize or know that he's turning off a lot of people who aren't just black women? And you need black women to win, don't you, these days?
You should. Let me just tell you what. Anybody who thinks you can't win, you can win without black women is a fool. If you just go back and you look at 2016, 2014, 2012, it's just not possible anymore. So you're absolutely right about that, Fred. But a couple things. I mean, we know from a number of research pieces that were done after 2016, the highest indicator of support for President Trump was racism and sexism, and by that, people expressed it as fear of change, right? And that is why he used fear-mongering and this othering strategy to say it's those people's fault, your problems, and I'm with you, I'm of you, right? And so that is going to be his strategy again in 2020, right? Is to other. It's what he did to President Obama. It is what he's trying to do to these women who are Americans, and they were, elected members of Congress, and he knows very well what he's doing. And it is about racism and misogyny, and it's clear that's going to be the strategy again in 2020. And Fred, I'll tell you, I think what's really critical, I'm so glad we're talking about this, and I've been so proud of CNN that we've been talking about it most of the day, because we have to call it out again and again and again, because here's the other piece of this. The demographic shifts in this country, it's happening. It's already happened. We're here. We're not going anywhere. And if we're, as a country, I think one of our greatest challenges is how do we learn to move forward together? He's not interested in that, right? He's interested in this small bit of his base that he thinks he can just keep them whipped up and believing that change isn't going to happen when it's right here.
So, Maria, what is it about this moment today in these tweets? Because it's not an anomaly, coming from this president, because there is already a pattern, whether it was before he was president, with birtherism, or whether you're talking about housing discrimination cases, while as president, Frederica Wilson. I mean, there are so many instances, but there still remained a sort of collective silence, about how offensive, outrageous, horrible it is. But then something today may have elicited something else. And I don't know what it is, but can you describe, if there is a difference, what is it, based on the pattern that we've seen?
Sure. I think the difference, at least to me, what really struck me, Fred, is that up until now, there has been so much pussyfooting around what the president says, what he does. There's still been so many people that are reluctant to call it racism, to call it xenophobia, to call it misogyny. Whereas today he used words that really there is no other way to describe it, right? When he talks about 4 women of color, and a lot of them have heritage that is from another country, but they are American, right? Then he says they should go back to where they came from. That is classic, not just racist language, Frederica, that is white supremacist language. This is what is so different to me about what happened today. He is parroting and using language that comes from white supremacy, and there's no way to get around that.
And I refrain from ever trying to editorialize, but there is ignorance here in a different way, because it's very easy to figure out when you've got these 4 U.S. members of Congress, 3 of which are born in the United States of America, 1 born overseas, but then raised in America. I mean, I'm an American, but I was born overseas in Africa, but I am an American. So it's just the ignorance of placement and association and what's American, what isn't, and this whole going back to, from where you came. I mean, it's so insulting and so hurtful on so many levels.
But, can I just offer, my family is from the South, and part of it is, I used to get this when I was a kid, when people would say things like, go back to Africa. And I'm like, my people are from Virginia. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we wouldn't even know where to go, right? And there is also, to what Maria was saying, there's an ignorance, as you're saying, Fred, but there's also, there's a historical thread here, right? This sort of go back where you came from that we've heard over and over and over.
Where other is like it's an insult, but from somewhere other, or even the inference of.
Exactly. And I just would offer, the last thing I would say is, I really would hope that these 4 women members of Congress and all of us, I want to hear from the Republican Party. If you disagree with President Trump, you need to speak out now, because if you don't, then you're complicit.
Except I spoke with a former member of Congress, Mia Love, earlier too, who also placed blame on the freshmen for, I guess not taking the high road was the best way she put it, by saying, they're in the muck too by all of the name calling and the talk of race, and even singling out the Nancy Pelosi and accusing her of having a problem with people of color. But none of that helps, and that it's all kind of circular.
But you know what, Fred? It's the president of the United States. These are freshman women who are coming in to fight for their communities, whom he has insulted, marginalized, and attacked from the moment he came down those stairs when he called Mexican rapists and criminals. And so I'm sorry, but the blame is not at their feet. The blame is at the feet of this president, who has allowed this kind of talk, because now he is using it himself, and he is allowing each and every racist and white supremacist in this country, and people who feel misogynistic against women, who can't understand why women have these powers now and don't think that they should. He is giving them permission to come out of the woodwork and behave the way that we all learned we should not behave. You know what else is interesting, Frederica? As an immigrant myself, and as an American citizen, I would challenge this president, and I bet you if he took the citizenship test that we all had to take to become citizens of this great country, he would fail.
We'll leave it there for now, ladies. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Maria
Fred.
Cardona, Karen Finney, thank you. We'll be right back. Right now, ICE agents are conducting raids to round up undocumented immigrants across the country, and as many as 2,000 migrants are expected to be targeted in at least 9 major U.S. cities. Senior administration officials say the raids will be focused on recent arrivals in the country. Ron Brownstein is a senior editor for The Atlantic and a senior CNN political analyst, and Brian Stelter is CNN's chief media correspondent and host of Reliable Sources. Good to see you both.
You too. Hey.
All right, so Ron, you first. You know, we know about today's raids mainly due to President Trump announcing and then confirming that they would start today. So are these sweeps really about removing undocumented, migrants, or is it, really about politics and the president rallying his base by showing that he's tough on immigration and he should be reelected?
Well, given the limits of detention space, this can't be more than kind of a token effort. But this is part of the broader sweep of the Trump presidency. It is essentially the parts of America that are least touched by and least affected by immigration, imposing a hardline anti-immigration agenda on the parts of America that have a lot of immigrants and overwhelmingly resist that agenda. Just a few quick facts, right? 90% of the House Republicans now are in districts where there are fewer immigrants than the national average. 45 of the 53 Republican senators are from the 30 states where immigrants are the smallest share of the population. 26 of the 30 states that Trump won are those same 30 states with the smallest share of immigrants in their population. He has moved the Republican Party to a point where it is overwhelmingly barricaded into the parts of America that are least touched by immigration. And that coalition is now trying to impose its agenda over what I think is the most unprecedented resistance I have seen in 35 years of covering national politics, open resistance from mayors in all of the cities that you cite in your map there.
Right. These mayors saying they will not allow their police forces to assist ICE agents if called upon. So Brian, Trump continues to use Twitter, to drive this conversation. He tweets about the ICE raids before it happens. Today, he sends out a series of racist tweets attacking Democratic women of color. It's become his weapon of choice for a very long time before, he even, got the seat in the office. So he obviously likes to control the message. Is this today all for show?
The short answer would be yes. We can just end the segment. Yes, this is for political purposes, and I think we should keep that in mind as we talk about and as we cover these ICE raids. The president wants attention on this. He wants these communities to be fearful. From what we're seeing from local reporters, some of those communities are very fearful as a result, and it seems like the president talking about these raids ahead of time has changed ICE's plans. They are rolling this out over a series of days because they want some element of surprise. If our viewers have not read Adam Serwer's essay in The Atlantic called "The Cruelty is the Point," this is the perfect day to Google, look it up. Agree with it, disagree with it. But his argument is that the cruelty of these policies is the point. Whether that's ICE raids that are being very promoted and showy, or whether it's the president attacking these congresswomen with racist messages, the cruelty is the point. That's the argument he's been making for a year now, and it seems to be more and more true.
Ron?
I was going to say, if you look at polling, both demographically and geographically, as I said, under Trump, the Republican coalition has become overwhelmingly centered on the voters and the parts of the country that are most uneasy with demographic change. There was polling from the Public Religion Research Institute last year. 2/3 of Republicans now say that the growing number of immigrants threaten traditional American values and traditions, as opposed to 60% of the country overall saying that immigrants strengthen the society. What Trump has done is kind of local, and by the way, views on the wall overwhelmingly correspond with views on kind of the broader impact of immigration. So what he has done is he is centering the party primarily on the parts of the country that are least comfortable with all of these changes, and everything we are seeing from the wall, which is symbolic in its own way of standing against change, to these raids, to the openly racist tweets, is an acknowledgement of that. And what's really striking is how few Republicans, however much they may grumble privately, have been willing to stand up against this redefinition of the party. Paul Ryan tells us 18 months later in Tim Alberta's book, American Carnage, how upset he was. Are we going to hear from him on this in 18 months?
And so, Brian, the president needs to grow, his support. But with his approval rating consistent with, it's his highest right now, but it's also consistent when it was last highest. He's not demonstrating to really grow any support, and it doesn't seem to matter to him.
But if he can make his fans feel really good ahead of 2020, and remember, he's going to hold a rally this week, another rally in August. If he can make them feel really good, and he can define down the Democrats, and right now the Democrats do not have a messenger as powerful as Trump. There's nobody out there driving the national conversation the way Trump is. Then maybe that is enough. For decades, this country has been fighting against the kind of racist talk that we're now seeing from the White House. And it's amazing more Democrats are not speaking out more loudly. They don't seem to know. They don't seem to have Trump's television playbook. Some of them are trying, but none of them are able to dominate the national conversation like Trump. Maybe that'll change. Maybe it won't.
Yeah, the president's approval rating, 44%, close to... It was almost 44% when he first got into office. So
still underwater.
As far as he's concerned, consistent. All right.
But he believes he can win with just his base.
Right. Looks like it.
And that'll be tested in 2020.
We'll see. We'll talk about it. Ron and Brian, you guys know everything, so I'll just believe everything you say. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Brian and Ron. Appreciate it. Still ahead. The worst is yet to come as Tropical Storm Barry still churns over land with 11 million people still in the path of heavy rains and fierce winds. All right, so as ICE raids, immigration customs enforcement raids are underway across the country, the President of the United States told progressive Democratic women of color in Congress to go back to the crime-infested places from which they came. He is targeting specifically these women. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, born in New York. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, born in Somalia, later growing up in Minnesota. And Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, born in Chicago, Illinois. In a series of racist tweets, we're calling it as we see it, this morning, Trump writing this. So interesting to see progressive Democrat congresswomen who originally came from countries whose governments are a complete and total catastrophe, the worst, most corrupt and inept anywhere in the world, if they even have a functioning government at all, now loudly and viciously telling the people of the United States, the greatest and most powerful nation on earth, how our government is to be run. Why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came, then come back and show us how it is done. These places need your help badly. You can't leave fast enough. I'm sure that Nancy Pelosi would be very happy to quickly work out free travel arrangements. Well, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi immediately firing back with this, saying, when real Donald Trump tells 4 American congresswomen to go back to their countries, he reaffirms his plan to make America great again has always been about making America white again. Our diversity is our strength, and our unity is our power. So moments ago, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez responded with this, Mr. President, the country I come from and the country we all swear to is the United States. But given how you've destroyed our border with inhumane camps, all at a benefit to you and the core who profit off them, you are absolutely right about the corruption laid at your feet. And Congresswoman Ilhan Omar wrote, you are stoking white nationalism because you are angry that people like us are serving in Congress and fighting against your hate-filled agenda. So that is how the day has started. Joining me right now, CNN contributor Selena Zito and CNN political commentator David Swerdlick. Good to see you both. All of this so disturbing. These words coming from the President of the United States, who is supposed to be a unifier, no matter what time of your office. So Selena, how does this sit with people, especially supporters of the president?
Well, I wish I would have just stayed in the church instead of hearing all of that, right? Here's the unfortunate thing. There's 2 unfortunate things. That we are so polarized right now that even if you are a Trump supporter and you don't like what he says, you may not even say anything at all, push back at all, or may not even see it as racist, because they will take that line where it says, and that you can go back and fix it and then come back, and we're just so polarized.
But it's go back to where you came from. We're talking about 3 of the 4 women that he's targeting, all sitting members of Congress who are actually born in the United States, and the 4th who was born abroad but is very much American as a U.S. Congresswoman.
Right. I mean, I just think that we are so polarized. I don't know that this moves anything. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's where we are today. And the really frustrating thing, I think, is the state of of immigration on both sides. We can't even, Washington can't even have an effective way of discussing it, because you look at the protest, you look at the possible ICE deportations, and no one's talking meaningfully about how we fix this. We do need to have more people immigrate into our country. Our workforce demands it. And yet, we also have a problem with people coming through here illegally, and we don't know what the filter system in terms of knowing who's safe and who's not.
Okay, but Selena, is this really about immigration, or is this the president using immigration as a veil in which to spew and say things like that?
Oh, yeah, I think everybody's using it in a terrible way. Not as terrible as that, but everybody's using it as a sledgehammer, as opposed to being effective and as opposed to being thoughtful about the problems that we face. And I don't see us moving from this point, and I don't think that's good.
So David, where are you in this? Because, I don't know if this is really an issue of, nor are we trying to elicit a conversation about was this right, was this wrong? But clearly, this is disturbing coming from the President of the United States. And you see these words coming from the President, and certainly this is not what you expect. However, at the same time, this is the same President who has had a pattern of, whether you talk about housing discrimination before he was President, whether you talk about birtherism, the list goes on, whether you talk about S-hole countries. So the vernacular, the sentiment has been there. But one has to wonder at this point, is it more worrisome or damaging when you have supporters of the president who remain silent, or those who say, he's only saying exactly what it is I've been thinking and feeling, and let's act on it?
Sure, Fred. So good afternoon. And you used the word disturbing, and I think disturbing is definitely the starting point for this. I know you know this, and I want our viewers to know this. Selena and I are friends. We have love for each other. We agree and disagree respectfully all the time. In this case, I have a very, very different analysis from Selena. In this case, the president's tweets, as you said at the top, were racist. They had no business being tweeted by a president of the United States who is not only the head of government, but the head of state and supposed to be the moral leader of the country. The most charitable way you could interpret these was as him saying, love it or leave it. That's probably too soft. It's at least an S-hole countries part deux. And I really think it's a fair assessment to look at the president's tweets here. Again, he went to the point where this is past anything about issues or immigration. For fans of the Spike Lee movie, Do the Right Thing, this was everything except saying, go the F back to Africa. And if people don't understand how that is read into that tweet, they have not been paying attention the last few years. This is a situation where you had a disagreement between the squad, Congresswomen Ocasio Cortez, Presley, Tlaib, and Omar, and the Speaker of the House, Speaker Pelosi, of their own party. And what the president achieved here was refocusing everybody within 24 hours to realize, oh, wait a second, all of those women I just named are on one side, and the president is on the immoral side of this issue.
And it's the president has also seized upon that moment, because that moment of, the squad and Nancy Pelosi and, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez saying that the House Speaker was singling out, women of color. The president is perhaps springing off that. But at the same time, the president already has a prior history of his sentiment from the S-hole countries to, race, Mexican rapists, etc., Selena. So it doesn't make it that much more easy to digest that this would come from the president, and on a day when ICE raids are underway, singling out, looking for undocumented migrants who have been served deportation orders.
Yeah, I mean, we really are. I mean, we've been saying this for years, right? But we really are in a remarkable place right now. And by remarkable, I don't mean like this is great, right? I mean like, who would have thought that we would have been in this position, that these kinds of conversations and these kinds of words were coming from the president, but also the conversations and the volleying back and forth between some of the new freshman members and the speakers, conference. It's just been. It's like watching a tennis match. You don't know what's going to come next. You don't know who's going to volley something like right across your face. And I don't think any of these conversations are good at all, or these accusations between everybody. It's just been crazy.
Right, David. It's so hurtful. I mean, it's hurtful on so many levels to hear this, to read the tweets, and I don't know if it's more troubling that there is a silence, that we are hearing a sentiment from, some members of Congress who from Hakeem Jeffries to Ocasio Cortez, but why is it that there are only a few who are speaking out, who are leaders, who are, representing this country, who are not saying, wait a minute, what's going on here?
So sure, Fred, a couple of things. First of all, I haven't seen all of the different members of Congress and political leaders who've weighed in and responded. I think I would have to look and see who on the Democratic side had responded. You did show that response from Speaker Pelosi. On the Republican side, though, I think there is a pattern where Republicans, because they need the same voters that support President Trump to support them, they have been very reluctant, even in situations as clear-cut as this, to call the president out or to chastise the president,
because
or just
there's politics and then
themselves.
there's right and wrong.
There's politics and there's right and wrong. The one thing I do agree with Selena about is that I don't think this is going to move the needle that much. The president's approval rating is around 44%, maybe a little higher. It's exactly the same place it was when he took office on Inauguration Day. People that like President Trump. We've learned in 2.5 years that some of his appeal was about being an outsider. Some of his appeal was about some of the things he proposed, but a lot of his appeal was about doing exactly what he did this morning.
So in other words, you're saying there is no consequence as a result of the president's words or actions or this sentiment, but instead a feeling of reward. He gets a feeling of reward to be able to say these things.
Yes, because the issues that don't work for the president, Iran doesn't work for the president. In some ways, even the economy sometimes doesn't work for him when he's arguing over interest rates. The Jeffrey Epstein story doesn't work for the president. I could go on and on. But the president feels comfortable, and I think he's right, that he is resonating with his core supporters when he's talking about immigration, when he's railing against people perceived to be on the far left, especially these women of color in Congress. And actually, wait, Fred, let me stop myself and make one more quick point here, which is that I think part of the discourse that has gone wrong here, it's vile what the president tweeted this morning, especially disrespecting a worship day, a church day. But it's vile that he did that today anyway, no matter who it was directed at. We are not talking about just anybody. I'm sorry, I don't mean to put members of Congress on a pedestal. These are members of Congress, members of the co-equal branch of government. There's far too much referring to people as AOC and as Ilhan and the squad.
Elected by the American people.
These people are Congresswomen, Ocasio Cortez, Presley, Tlaib, Omar, whether you agree or disagree with them, whether you want to vote them out or not vote them out, they have all taken the same oath to the Constitution. The president has, and I think we've lost a little bit of sight of that.
Yeah, co-equal branches of government. All right, Selena Zito, David Swerdlick, we're not finished with that topic and beyond. We'll have you back soon. Thank you so much. Also, still ahead,